Okay, welcome back on page 237, talking about copyright and intellectual property. And we mentioned before, there's no requirement for me to state that something is copyrighted. The fact that it's published electronically means, for example, I write up lecture notes and I put them on Canvas. Do I have to say anywhere in Canvas or on the document that my lecture notes are copyrighted? No, I don't. So fair use, this is mostly common sense rules, mostly. So I can take like a short excerpt from something, for news or for teaching. For example, if I had a 15-second clip of a Monty Python sketch from TV from the 1960s, okay? If it's like, 5 or 6 seconds long, is that considered fair use? Yeah, no one's going to say, you're copyright. Now, if you had an entire song running in the background of your slide presentation, there was a song running in the background, and you didn't have pay royalties for it, then yeah, you could have that. Okay, financial reporting, page 237. The Sarbanes-Oxley Act on page 220, 2002. This one was kind of significant. Up to this point, line cheating and stealing was just normal. Okay? It just happened. But this made it slightly different. What they basically said is, we want the chief executive officer to certify that these numbers in the prospective or annual report or whatever are actually correct. Now, this puts personal liability against the person. That's what made the difference. Executives now are personally responsible for they cannot lie in a quarterly report and not face consequences. So that's a good thing. It applies to all publicly traded corporations and accounting firms. Okay, that's essentially it. Now, if you're a mom and pop, that had anything to do with you. Freedom of information. So requests typically from the federal government, but states have basically the same thing. As long as it's not dealing with national security and you can redact any personally identifiable information, typically they get it. Now, a lot of people don't understand. For example, they'll say, do a search on your documents and tell me this, this, and this. It's like, no. Freedom of information is about I'm releasing existing documents. That does not require me to create a document for you. Okay, it doesn't require me to perform any type of research or document lookup. Okay, it's about existing documents. Okay, good, all right. Okay, the payment card industry data security standards. So PCI, payment card industry data security standards, page 238. So this is not affiliated with any government agency. What happened is, the major credit card company, Visa, MasterCard, and those guys, kind of got together and said, we need something that online retailers can put a badge on their website to saying, we adhere to these standards. And they're pretty good. It's a voluntary thing. You can apply for it if you want. You don't have to. And if you do, well, then you have to follow some rules about encryption, and you have to have, annual inspections and all those kinds of things. So how does this compare to Europe? Well, quite frankly, Europe has almost identical, except they put it in the law that requires companies of a certain size to have these protection mechanisms in place. We don't. We encourage them, but no, it's the PCI DSS is not a requirement. Okay, let me get to this next thing. So here's what it requires. Build and maintain a secure network, protect the cardholder data, maintain vulnerability management, implement strong access control, regularly monitor and test, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There are even companies that'll come out and do this thing for you. Set it up and do all the stuff and, charge you a small fee. And so you proudly support your little badge you put on your website. Okay, local and state regulations. So federal laws have little impact on private business. Federal law typically is about, the executive branch and, what the Army has to do, or the state organizations, what the university has to do. But if I'm a, boot repair business or in downtown Killeen, well then no, none of those really apply to me. So how am I supposed to keep up with all this stuff? Well, I mean, there's an awful lot. I mean, for example, if I'm shipping something overseas, man, oh man, I probably need, there's an American Society of International Law. That sounds a little weird, but they can kind of help you out. If you're a member, go into their website and say, I'm getting ready to do this. What do you think? Kind of thing. So let's talk about international law, page 240. So if I do business over the internet, I might unwittingly trip some international law thing, okay? First of all, it's very complicated to collect taxes, for example. For example, I'm an Android developer, and nonstop I get notices from Google saying, the tax rate for, Israel has changed. I'm going, whatever, dude. I don't care. But anyway, so let's talk about some of the things that are different, because basically most of the modern world follows some fairly decent and common sense rules. There are a couple that are out there, so let's talk about them. Defamation, okay, libel and defamation, okay, spoken or written. I'm gonna skip that part because that's not really relevant. Here's the thing: in the U.S., if I said you're a liar, and you go, I'm gonna take you to court, if I can prove that what I said was correct, well, then you're gonna lose the case, because yes, it was presidential towards you. Yes, it was negative towards you, but it was also 100% correct. So therefore, you don't have a case. That is not how it's done in the UK. In the UK, it doesn't matter if it was true. If you caused them harm, if a negative rating on a website caused the company harm, they could sue you and demand that you take down the comment. That's a lot different than the U.S. For example, if I was a U.S.-based company and I was trying to do some business, I would probably, on their website, I'd probably take the comment section off. Because negative reviews, I have no way of controlling that. So I'm going to skip a bunch of stuff. Let's talk about the World Trade Organization. Basically, that's the one that basically handles the international application of intellectual property. So it's how one country talks to another country about, here's our laws. We want you to make sure you have something comparable. Because it wouldn't do any good if we said, yeah, that's copyright protected here, but somebody in some other country says, I don't care, and they steal all your information. The Digital Millennium Copyright Act, DCMA. Now, this is a weird one, page 241. It's a U.S. law, but just like we just talked about, it's kind of required by a treaty. We signed a treaty with these companies that said we're going to have comparable laws, okay? So this one, yes, it's a U.S. law, but the basis of it came from a treaty. And key provisions. A user can't circumvent the protections. So if I put encryption in there, you're not allowed to break the encryption. And you can't sell devices that break the encryption. You can't sell devices that break my encryption. And you can't export apps and things. It prohibits altering the embedded information, the copyrighted material. And it excludes search results for infringement. Okay. Now, here's the point. This could get a little crazy, all right? Because there are certain exceptions that come up. I mean, right now, one of the hot topics is the right to repair. There's some websites on right to repair, and each state is basically doing their own thing, because in the absence of any federal guidance, each state's kind of doing the thing. But tractors, I mean, I would have never thought that, I'm going to use John Deere as an example. I have no idea if they're guilty of anything, so don't take me literally here. But a tractor manufacturer puts embedded information software into their tractor to track, soil moisture or something as you're going across the field, whatever. You're not allowed to go in there and tweak it or extract information or do anything to it. You have to buy their software in order to use your tractor. And that pissed off a bunch of people. It's like, wait a minute, I already bought the tractor. It cost me $100,000. And you're trying to tell me that I can't go to a competitor to get software? I have to use your software and have to pay exactly what you're asking for it? And they're going, yeah, but, DCMA. It's like, oh, man. So yeah, there's an awful lot of backlash about the right to repair. And part of the reason, maybe, is the organization that does this is kind of weird. The U.S. Copyright Office is part of the Library of Congress. It's like, what? That seems like a very strange place to put the Copyright Office. Now, they do publish annual exceptions to the rules. And one of the things we talked about early on in Chapter 1 was, yes, you can jailbreak your phone. So I have an iPhone, and I want to break into it to be able to do things that the Apple folks never intended me to do. I want more permissions. I want to be able to delete some of their crap and add my own stuff. Okay. Yes, that is allowed, but it's an annual exception every single year. And so you have to keep track of it all. Kind of weird. All right. So ethics and information security, page 242. So there's, a professional organization's code of ethics. So they talk about this really cool thing called the 10 Commandments. So 10 Commandments of ethical use. So thou shalt not use a computer to harm others, or interfere with other people's work, or snoop around other people's stuff, or use it to steal, or use it to lie, or use it to copy, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. A lot of good stuff in here. All right, so there's some other scenarios beyond this top 10. Let's talk about failure to acknowledge the contribution of others. Let's say you're working on a team, and there's 4 people on the team, but you're decided to do the presentation. They all elected you because you're the smooth talker. So you go up and say, well, here's my ideas for this project, and everybody else is going, what? What do you mean your ideas? This was a group effort, okay, that kind of thing. Failure to point out design flaws, like, you're working on something and you go, ooh, that is not going to work. But, Bob's the one running this project, and I really hate Bob, and he hates me, so I'm just going to keep my mouth shut, and I'm just going to watch the train wreck happen. No, that is not ethical. And then failure to act quickly to resolve a flaw. Again, yeah, somebody reported a bug, but I'm going on vacation, so too bad. It'll wait till I get back. Yeah, that's an unethical thing. It has nothing to do with these 10. So sad to say, there are some differences in cultures in different areas. For example, if you were to look at the rate of piracy in the U.S. compared to some of the Pacific Rim countries, you'd be kind of surprised. So here's a goofy little chart that basically talks about this. So this area, the amount of rates of unlicensed software, we're talking about like half of all the software is not paid for. It's been pirated, copied. Wow, that's bad. And man, there's nothing we can do about this. This is just the way the worlds are set up. Now, yes, you can have the International Trade Organization, and yes, they can put pressure on these countries, to clean up their act and, step up policing. But basically, yeah, it's a lost cause. Okay. So software license infringement. So we're talking about in Chapter 2. Widely different views on how this works. Illicit use. Most everyone condemns viruses and hacking. But when it comes to kind of a gray area, like, well, here's a copy of a cool game that I got. Would you like a copy? I broke the encryption on the game, and so you don't have to pay for it here. Like, oh, man, a lot of people are like, yeah, I'll take it. And of course, then misuse of corporate resources. Now, this is where they flip the coin on us, okay? Where in the U.S. it's perfectly okay most of the time to like occasionally use email or occasionally use the Xerox machine and those kind of things. Typically in corporate organizations or in the Pacific Rim, that is viewed as very, very bad. So I'm thinking low tolerance for using the Xerox machine, but not a single copy of Microsoft Office in your whole organization is legal? Wow. Okay. So ethics and education. Obviously, employees have to be trained. And this is difficult because of the cultural backgrounds. We have to kind of level the ethical perception. Hey, this is probably a good place to stop for the 15-minute mark.